This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane Tatum and Tonya Lead.
Shane, let's talk about what it's like to start a business, but things don't quite turn out the way you planned.
You mean your business plan doesn't work exactly according to the way you wrote it out?
That would be the one.
Or did you even do a business plan?
Well, I did a business plan. I downloaded one off the internet and put my name on it because, I had to when I started my business.
That's right. Because you got to do that because people say, well, what's your plan? So the world has basically created this environment where we think we have to do something. And so we respond to that and we really don't even know why we did it. But I think things that don't go according to plan, it depends on the personality. Are you a go with the flow kind of optimistic view? Are you a box checker? It's got to work this way. And if it doesn't happen that way, you're ready to curl up into a fetal position and suck your thumb. Personalities are going to see that in different ways. The independent agency side of things, my experience is that so many of the individuals starting new independent agencies over the last 5 to 7 years came from some type of environment where they were sort of insulated from the ownership things. So that's generally where I think a lot of the frustration comes into play, is that shift from producer, salesperson to ownership, and that wasn't taken into consideration.
I think a lot of the frustration comes from they were expecting to sell $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a month right out of the gate, and they're sitting at $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month, and their phone's not ringing.
How did the expectation get created in the first place? And it's probably past experience. It's probably based on what somebody else told them or somebody else did. Hopefully it wasn't created by the agency or group or organization that they work with, but somewhere, maybe it was a podcast that steered them wrong. Somewhere they heard you should be doing X amount of production, and then they're not. So what do you do?
You know what the problem there is? They were listening to the wrong podcast. They weren't listening to us. But now they've seen the light. They're in the right place, and we can help.
The first thing that, if I could rewind that to where they were planning or they were starting, is creating the expectation. And some of the best business advice, this is not agency specific, by the way. This is any business. This is starting any business. So some of the best business advice, not agency advice, that I've ever gotten is when you're going to start a business and you're writing down from a financial standpoint, take and write down your expected revenue and then write down your projected expected expenses. And then in another column, go over here and cut your revenue in half, and then take your expenses and then double your expenses, and then look at your profit and then decide if it's still a good deal or not. That is an extremely conservative view of things, and it might work if it's positive. If the number's positive, it might work. That was the stressed figure that was put into place there. Now, that's general business, not agency business. I'm much more bullish and optimistic about the insurance agency business, but that was really good advice from a financial planning standpoint. And it also helps with expectations and understanding your cost structure and all of those things. But I really think that we tend to project much more optimistic than what reality is going to be.
So how do we fix it?
Cut your revenue in half and double your expenses. I mean, we're talking about expectations, right? And look, we're being sold in the marketplace by folks who are trying to sell us something. So join this organization, do this thing, and you're going to be successful. What prospective new agency owners want to hear is that you're going to have success. Isn't that what people want to hear?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if an organization could guarantee success, which they cannot, but if they could, then 100% of people would sign up with that organization. But the reality of it is no one can guarantee success because it is all based on that individual's performance. I would have easily and very quickly signed a professional baseball contract with you name it. I don't care who they were. If they would have said, we guarantee you that you will be in the big leagues in 4 years. But the problem is none of those contracts say that. None of them guarantee that you're going to make it to the big leagues. The reality of it is anybody can take the risk and the leap and the jump if there's a guarantee at the end. But business ownership has no guarantee. That's just not reality. And that's part of the conversation here, is that when you're a non-owner and you want to make the leap to ownership, is that you're saying, well, I want it because it's going to give me more freedom. It's going to give me more flexibility, or it's going to give me more earnings. And we know that at least early on in the game, that may not be the case, especially in today's labor market. And this is going to sound like I'm anti-agency starter, but I'm not. But I'm a realist. So I think that it's really important, honesty wins, that people understand this, that when you make that leap from non-owner to owner, especially in a startup role, that the guarantees are not there. You left this safe job environment and you jumped out into, my success is going to be based on me. It's going to be based on how I do. And that is so thrilling and exciting to me as an individual, but it has to be taken with a dose of reality.
But don't overdose on reality, because you need to believe in yourself to be successful. You know, we have prospective partners that we have talked to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times. They are so excited and they're so ready, even to the point of having their office space rented. But at that last minute, they just don't believe in themselves enough to make the leap.
So you need to be capable of being a 26th round pick and believing that you can still make it to the big leagues. You need to be able to dream with the reality. I agree that you're betting on yourself. And who else? If you can't bet on yourself, well, why should someone else bet on you? I've had people who were willing to allow me to bet on myself, to dream. I was fortunate I had parents that encouraged me to dream. I hope I've been that type of parent. That's really important in this thing too.
So we're in it. We're 6 months in. We're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on, keep going. The phone's not ringing. I'm still trying to develop my referral partners. I'm still trying to develop relationships. What do we tell that partner?
I need you to breathe. I need you to not start panicking. I need you to seek counsel, and I need you to really listen to that counsel. I don't need you to seek counsel with the idea that you already know it and you're just doing it to go through the motions. I think listening to that counsel from successful individuals, and when they say, hey, you're spending a lot of time on stuff that doesn't matter. You need to spend time on these 2 things. Well, then if it's wise counsel, then why wouldn't you listen to that? That's a frustration point on my end. You sought out this counsel, and this counsel said, go this way, focus on these things, and you ignored it. You decided, I don't want to do that. It's too hard. I can't do that. Or it's out of my comfort zone. That doesn't make me feel comfortable to go do that.
That doesn't work in my area because my area is different.
I was a witness to many conversations as having a father who was a banker in a small town, where folks would come in and say, I don't know, help me with my budget, help me with this. I need to borrow some money because I'm upside down over here, or I'm messed up over here. And I would witness time and time again, my dad lay out a budget for somebody and say, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this. You need to cut this. Them be very thankful on the surface, go away, come back 6 months later and repeat the conversation because they didn't do what he asked, what he showed them. This thing of seeking counsel and then ignoring the counsel that you get, it's just insanity.
And the opposite of that, I see so many people get frustrated because they seek wise counsel from 12 to 15 of their closest friends. And so then you're trying to create a horse by committee that becomes a camel. So find one person, find 2 people, but don't try to ask everybody you know or everybody in the industry how to make your business successful, and then try to figure out what part of what do you want to apply to your business. That is real frustration right there.
Some of that is the reason I'm seeking that many different opinions is I'm trying to find the person that'll give me the validation to the thing that I want to do. There's some of that as well.
So there's a sign in my office that says advice is what you ask for when you already know the answer but wish you didn't.
It is, and you don't want to hear it. When I'm wrong, I really just want to be right, and I just want to be validated. And that was the young Shane. That was the 20-something-year-old Shane. I would seek out validation for the idea. And when I would get negative response to the idea, I would go to the next person. And that was such a disaster for me. It was a disaster for me personally. It was a disaster for me professionally. And I always ended up in a bad spot. If I listened and I took that and I applied it to my situation, then I generally ended up in a pretty good spot.
Now, on the negative side of this, we have seen where maybe a new agent sought the counsel of someone who was not so wise and made some suggestions that maybe weren't quite above board. What would you say in that situation?
Honesty wins. Cutting corners is what I think you're talking about here. Well, you don't need to be doing that because, nobody does that. Integrity and character and doing it the right way, I believe, always wins in the end. And I believe that even though it may hurt you short term, you gain the long term. We've been through this with situations where a commercial producer is running up against an account and looking at this account and going, there's no way that the underwriter at company X knows what the risk level of this company is. The classification is wrong. There's no way they're writing this business. This is something that commercial producers run up against all the time because the current agent has it misclassified or isn't doing something and it's not an auditable policy. They've cut corners to save the customer some dollars, but they're a claim away from disaster.
Shane, I'm 6 months in. I'm struggling. I'm not where I thought I was going to be. And it's causing challenges at home with my spouse. My spouse is having to cut back on spending. We may be having to look at putting our children in public schools instead of private schools. What can I do to turn my business around fast to save my relationship with my spouse?
You entered this situation fully understanding that the risk is being taken for better or worse. And are you really in this together? Were you really in this together in the first place? Because that's the sit down saying, hey, this is the worst. You remember that for better or worse? Well, this is the worst part of that because I believe that I can do this, but it isn't panning out exactly how I thought it was going to pan out. And I'm not saying there's this never ending, never pull the plug kind of approach to this thing. You do need to be hitting some metrics. You need to be hitting some production plans. Over exaggerated. If you set it up in the beginning that you were never going to miss a paycheck or you were going to go from earning $100,000 a year as a producer at agency XYZ, and now you're going to move over into your own agency, and in month 2, you're going to be on pace to make $100,000. You just set your expectations up to fail. If that's the discussion, you and your spouse are going to be in that bad spot because of that original expectation. Communication, number 1, is extremely important. If you're hiding that information, if you're hiding that slow start, that perceived early failure, then it's going to make it worse. As hard as it is to sit down and say, okay, this is going slower. I don't think it's going to be a 2-year thing. I think it's going to take me 4 years. How do we do this? Are we prepared for this? Are you prepared for this mentally? If you and your spouse can't get on the same page with that discussion, well, then maybe it is time to pull the plug because nothing from a business decision standpoint is worth the failure of a marriage. You have to lean and go back and say, okay, wait, marriage is first. If that's where we are and we can't get on the same page, then my opinion is you got to go marriage first always, and you got to backtrack on the business side.
I think one of the biggest challenges is that we set our goals incorrectly. We set goals that we're going to sell $20,000 this month. We're going to sell $30,000 next month. But we don't actually have a plan to reach those goals. So we get to the 15th of the month, we've sold $6,000 toward our $20,000 goal, and we don't know what's wrong. We don't know what to do. I think adjusting those goals might help. How many touch points are you going to make every Monday? How many touch points are you going to make every Tuesday? How much time are you going to spend out of the office? What networking events are you going to do? Set those specific financial goals, but then set miniature goals of touch points, telephone conversations, going by and visiting, spending time creating relationships, not looking at that number that's looming at the end of the month and getting in this paralysis. There's no way I'm going to make it.
Homework, there's about 3 or 4 podcasts where go back and listen to networking and marketing and time management and all of those things that we've talked about. There is a constant revisit of the things that we need to do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and build out from there. Because what happens is we get into the hustle and bustle of starting an agency, and there's stuff running at us and there's things everywhere, and we forget to stop and review where we are, where we've been, what we did, where we're going. We just start going, and then our time gets away from us. And then our week gets away from us because our day got away from us. And if our week gets away from us, the month gets away from us. And we've got to block time in. We've got to plan for the decompression, for the where am I? And if we do that, that's going to help clear our head. It's going to help us breathe. And don't do this at 3 o'clock with your brand new mortgage referral partner trying to get a hold of you for a closing. Don't do that then. You're going to have to do this after hours. Block some time out on the weekend. You're going to have to take some time outside of the normal business day so that you can really separate yourself from the busyness and go, okay, I need to do a checkpoint here on where I'm at. And I would encourage you to do that regularly, at least weekly for a while early on in the game. Because if you don't, you're going to look up in that 6-month time frame and go, I am not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not meeting my production goals. My referral sources aren't coming in like I thought. And you need to get back on the networking trail. You probably need to do that in month 2, but it's month 6 and you've lost 4 months because you stuck your head down in the busyness and you never looked up.
Another side of that is sometimes we get so focused on those financial goals. My business has to be at X by September or I'm not going to make it. And then you end up sacrificing your spiritual life, you sacrifice your family time, you sacrifice your physical and emotional health. And then September gets here, you haven't reached your financial goals, and then you've let all of these other things slide too, and then you're in a really bad place. So keep in mind specifically, what are your family goals through this? Are you going to have dinner with your spouse 3 times in a week? Are you going to celebrate small successes with him or with her every Tuesday? Are you going to make your kids' ball games, your kids' dance events? What are your physical goals? Are you going to still work out 3 or 4 mornings a week? What are you doing to continue to develop yourself personally? All of those things have to be cohesive in order for you to hit those financial goals.
They do, and that's that balance that we always talk about. And it has to start with the foundation of family. It has to start with, why did you do this in the first place? Why did you leave this job to become a business owner? You constantly have to go back there and remind yourself in the early days, because what you have to remember is that you're making an upfront investment of time and energy and things to get this business off the ground. And there's a light. You may not see the light in month 3, but there's a light at the end of this tunnel that you're after. That idea of making this early investment might mean that you may need to forego some things, but don't let that be the family time. Don't let the foregoing of the things be the things that are the reason you started this in the first place. There may be some financial things you forego, that new set of golf clubs,
a trip to the spa.
It's all about temporary sacrifice to get from point A to point B. That comes into play with our salary. If you're a $100,000 a year producer at the age of 26, which is amazing, by the way, and you are going to start an agency, what you have to think about is you may not be a $100,000 a year business owner for a little while. And what can you do? But that goes back to that initial established mindset is, are you even ready? People don't want to hear this, but are you even ready to start this agency? Or do you need to pause a year, 2 years, 3 years before you start this agency? Do a little saving, do a little standard of living adjustment. It's something that we need to think about if we're going to bootstrap this.
So I want to talk about our folks that are coming to the independent world from the captive world, an Allstate agent that is decided to leave Allstate and come to the dark side because we have cookies. I've seen where expectations are sometimes not initially met because the brand is not there. They're not able to spend thousands of dollars on mailers with the same messaging that their Allstate mailers had and get the same results. They're not able to sit behind their desk. The phone is not ringing. I see so much frustration out of situations like that.
Yeah, the independent agency channel in all of its advantages. The one thing that the independent agency cannot replicate and will not replicate is the big brand. It's not going to happen. We need to let it go. It's not the thing. That's why you see independent agency commissions from the captive agent carrier that has started an independent agency channel are generally higher than a captive agency commission schedule. There's truth in that. There's reasons for that. Our commission rates, whether you believe they're good or bad, on the independent agency channel, we are paid for the fact that there is no brand to support us. We are the brand. You can't just throw the brand up on a sign and people start walking in, or people start calling, or throw a brand in the local newspaper and then people start calling. That is something that is there in the captive channel. It's because they've spent billions of dollars over the last 30, 40, 50 years building that brand for the benefit of that distribution force to receive those opportunities. The independent agent has to create that opportunity and is not going to be the benefactor of some brand. It's just not going to happen. And I think the sooner we let that go, then the better off we're going to be. There's some people out there trying to do that in the independent agency space. There are franchise organizations. There are roll-up agency acquisition strategies, private equity-backed strategies. I don't care who they are. They're never going to match State Farm or Geico or Allstate's spending budget. I just do not believe it's ever going to happen.
And we want you to know going in that the culture of freedom that we provide agents doesn't mean you don't have to work hard as heck to be successful. It doesn't mean that you can decide to sleep in every Monday. It doesn't mean that you can leave the office on Friday at 11:30 for a long weekend. It doesn't mean that you can set your office hours from 10 to 2 and have the same kind of success as you would if you had set office hours from 8:30 to 5:30. The culture of freedom of the independent agency world doesn't mean you don't have to work your booty honey off.
It doesn't. And if you do it right, the effort has to be there. The effort has to be put in. But we are seeing it every day. Making the leap from direct channel carriers, captive agent carriers, producers, making this leap into independent agency ownership. In that first 1, 2, 3 years, the effort that was put in by these individuals are very vividly paying off, not only from the culture of freedom, but financially. I am just like completely blown away at the success level of so many people that have done this in the last decade, in the last 8 to 10 years. I'm seeing them take multiple vacations. I'm seeing them do things that is incredibly flexible and family oriented and being with their kids. There's so many examples that it's inspiring to watch them do this. I know I saw an agent the other day that's on vacation number 2, I believe, in this year. They could never have done that 8 years ago in their previous organization, their previous carrier, captive carrier. Mind you, they couldn't do that in the first 3.5, 4 years of their agency. But they're in about year 6, and the tipping point has happened. The flexibility, that culture of freedom is happening because of that early effort and the things that they did early on to kind of break through those stages.
I'm going to leave us with this from Tony Dorsett. To succeed, you need to find something to hold on to, something to motivate you, and something to inspire you.
Attitude's a choice. Make a great one.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you for joining us on IA Forward. Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now or learn more at iaforward.com. Ready to get the ball rolling with your independent agency? Learn more at IntegraAgent.com. That's IntegraAgent.com.